Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Rambles. January of 2025 has been long, and for a lot of people it has been very stressful, more than usual. It is hard to digest the world right now, and I feel like it's a good reminder to put out there into the world that emotions are what you make of them. Lately, discourse on all sorts of subjects seems to be more and more accelerated and emotional, and not pointing towards anything in particular. It is a good reminder for me, well, not a good reminder, a concerning reminder for me, that the longer I live through my life and the more of world events that I see, how many people have not developed good emotional regulation skills. And I want to preface all the rest of this by saying that just because you have good emotional regulation skills doesn't mean you can't improve on them. So whether you think you need to hear this or not, I recommend listening anyway, because I hope we can all remind each other and ourselves that sometimes the best thing you can do is to be mindful of how your own emotions are affecting your thoughts and your actions. There's a lot of negative feelings out in the world these days, and understandably so. There's a lot of fear and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration and a lot of things that, if left unchecked, if left to fester, if left to take over your brain and, influence the rest of your decisions and the rest of your feelings, can very quickly poison how you interact with the world. Can ruin your day, can ruin your week, ruin the month or the rest of your life, depending on how you let them affect you. And it's something that I think all reasonable adults need to take into account when interacting with the world. Especially when, for whatever reason, and there are many reasons for people doing it, there are a lot of people out there who deliberately want to agitate, upset, and manipulate you and your emotions, because one of the easiest ways to get somebody to do what you want, or manipulate somebody, basically, is to manipulate their emotions. It's hard to manipulate logic. It's hard to manipulate facts and truth, although we certainly have concerns about that in the last few years and really the last few decades, and basically as long as I can remember. But ultimately, facts and truth can be checked. Emotions, not so much. They're inherently subjective, and as a result, if somebody can read your emotions and read what makes you emotional about certain things, it makes you easy to manipulate. It makes you an easy tool for somebody else's ends. And it makes you easy to control. But from the other side, if you don't have control over your own emotions, it is very, very hard to get a hold of your own life and make rational decisions and interact with people or not interact with people intelligently. If you're smart, but you don't have good emotional regulation, it is very easy to lose all of your intelligence in a moment of, or moments of, heated feelings, and potentially change the course of your life, depending how things go. So, none of this is to say that you should not be emotional. This is not an advocacy for being dead to the world or suppressing your emotions or pushing them down. On the contrary, this is an encouragement to feel your emotions and feel them fully. But to understand that when you have those emotions, they have a lot of power to control you. That if you don't think about how they're affecting you, if you don't have the ability to step back and recognize how your anger might lead to more anger, might lead you to do something foolish, might lead you to do something that you don't actually believe, those sorts of things, or how your sadness might drive you to isolate or, do other things that would be harmful to yourself or others. Those will potentially leave permanent, lasting marks on yourself and the world. And so being able to look at your own emotional responses and to say, I am feeling angry right now. And I'm going to let the anger flow through me. And I'm going to understand what it's doing to me. And then I'm going to choose to make rational decisions after that. That's the kind of emotional regulation that more people need to be capable of doing. And it's hard. I think it's easy for those of us who have worked on it a long time to say that maybe it's just do it, but that isn't the truth. The truth is that, yes, there are people who have just never developed any emotional regulation, and that's concerning in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean that just because a person is an adult, you can get them to turn around from poorly emotionally regulated to well emotionally regulated in a short period of time. Just like anything you do in life, it is a skill you have to cultivate, you have to practice, you have to put into the world, and you have to check it, and then you have to work on it more. And especially in times like these, where sometimes it feels like the world is overwhelming, where the negativity seems to crash down all around you, to find your emotional center and re-regulate based on that. Because ultimately, even when the world seems awful, it's not. The world's a pretty good place. There are a lot of troubling things in it, but in the grand scheme of time, not to get too metaphysical here, they don't ultimately matter all that much. Words and actions done in anger and frustration and sadness and woe are rarely impactful in the long term. And if you feed off somebody else's emotions, negative emotions that they put into the world, and what you return is more negativity, whether that's because they're putting hate into the world and you respond with shock and anger, or if you see somebody who is so utterly overcome by sadness and despair, and all you can do is follow them into that, that doesn't make the world a better place. It doesn't make a world a happier place. We need to be able to feel those things. And often what people say after that is to move on. But I don't think that's correct. That's not the wording I would use. The best use of emotions is to let them drive you into better things. If you're overcome with frustration, if you feel like there's injustice in the world, don't let that drive you. Don't let the negative emotions be the driver. Let them be the motivator for something different. If you see pain and sadness in the world, Do your best to foster a little bit of happiness, even if it's only in yourself, because that makes a world of difference. I think all too often we talk about how we talk with high-minded sort of focus on grander scales, world-changing kinds of behavior. And maybe it's very cliche, but I believe that this kind of thing is true, that if you don't have control over yourself, if you don't have the ability to bring yourself happiness, if you don't have the ability to love yourself, if you don't have the ability to emotionally regulate, then how can you go into the world and support others in doing those things as well? How can you make good arguments for justice and kindness if you don't have those in yourself? It's not impossible, but it's harder. It's harder, and you're more likely to make errors. And this is not an aspiration towards some, perfection, but I think it's worth reminding for all of us pretty much all the time that if you can go into the world and be a little better than you were the day before, that if you can have a moment of kindness for yourself or even for another person that the day before you might not have, that has potentially immense effects. If everybody in the world could do that, just be a slight bit kinder than the day before, it would go a long way. I don't mean to be too serious or too dour. I try and keep it reasonably light on this channel. And I know I like to ramble about silly things or things that don't matter, or nitpick my way through things that are just entertainment. But times are difficult. The best we can do is help ourselves, to care for ourselves, and to be careful what we do for and at other people. Try not to succumb to the base temptations to be cruel, to be angry, to lash out at others. Do yourself and everybody else you can a favor, and remind yourself, just have a moment of reflection to be kind and to not let your emotions control you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Solipsist Rambles. I'll be back for something different next week.